Then after a moment she added, "What was that?" It was some beast I never heard before, and indeed there had been something very low, like a low growl close behind them. "I do not know," said the voice of Weston. "I think I do," said Ransom. "Hush," said the lady again, and no more was said that night. This was the beginning of a series of days and nights which Ransom remembered with loathing for the rest of his life. He had been only too correct in supposing that his enemy required no sleep. Fortunately the lady did, but she needed a good deal less than Ransom, and possibly as the days passed, came to take less than she needed. It seemed to Ransom that whenever he dozed, he woke to find the unman already in conversation with her. He was dead tired. He could hardly have endured it all, at all, but for the fact that their hostess quite frequently dismissed them both from her presence. On such occasions, Ransom kept close to the unman. It was a rest from the main battle, but it was a very imperfect rest. He did not dare to let the enemy out of his sight for a moment, and every day its society became more unendurable. He had full opportunity to learn the falsity of the maxim that the Prince of Darkness is a gentleman. Again and again he felt that a suave and subtle Mephistopheles, with red cloak and rapier and a feather in his cap, or even somber, tragic Satan out of Paradise Lost, would have been a welcome release from the thing he was actually doomed to watch. It was not like dealing with a wicked politician at all. It was much more like being set to guard an imbecile or a monkey, or a very nasty child. What had staggered and disgusted him when it first began saying, "Ransom, ransom," continued to disgust him every day and every hour. It showed plenty of subtlety and intelligence when talking to the lady, but Ransom soon perceived that it regarded intelligence simply and solely as a weapon, which it had no more wish to employ in its off-duty hours than a soldier has to do bayonet practice when he is on leave. Thought was for it a device necessary to certain ends, but thought in itself did not interest it. It assumed reason as externally and inorganically as it had assumed Weston's body. The moment the lady was out of sight, it seemed to relax. A great deal of his time was spent in protecting the animals from it. Whenever it got out of sight, or even a few yards ahead, it would make a grab at any beast or bird within its reach, and pull out some fur or feathers. Ransom tried, whenever possible, to get between it and its victim. On such occasions there were nasty moments when the two stood facing each other. It never came to a fight, for the unman merely grinned, and perhaps spat and fell back a little. But before that happened, Ransom usually had opportunity to discover how terribly he feared it. For side by side with his disgust, the more childlike terror of living with a ghost or a mechanized corpse never left him for many minutes together. The fact of being alone with it sometimes rushed upon his mind with such dismay that it took all his reason to resist his longing for society, his impulse to rush madly over the island until he found the lady and to beg her protection. When the unman could not get animals, it was content with plants. It was fond of cutting their outer rinds through with its nails, or grubbing up roots, or pulling off leaves, or even tearing up handfuls of turf. With Ransom himself, it had innumerable games to play. It had a whole repertory of obscenities to perform with its own, or rather with Weston's body, and the mere silliness of them was almost worse than the dirtiness. It would sit making grimaces at him for hours together, and then for hours more, It would go back to its old repetition of ransom, ransom. Often its grimaces achieved a horrible resemblance to people whom Ransom had known and loved in our own world. But worst of all, those moments when it allowed Weston to come back into its continence. Then its voice, which was always Weston's voice, would begin a pitiful, hesitant mumbling. "You be very careful, Ransom. I'm down in the bottom of a big black hole. No, I'm not, though. I'm on Perelandra. I can't think very well now, but that doesn't matter. He does all my thinking for me. It'll get quite easy presently. That boy keeps on shutting the windows. That's all right. They've taken off my head and put someone else's on me. I'll soon be all right now. They won't let me see my press cuttings." So then I went and told him that if they didn't want me in the first 15, they could jolly well do without me. See? Well, tell that young whelp it's an insult to the examiners to show up this kind of work. What I want to know is why I should pay for a first-class ticket and then he crowded out like this, and be crowded out like this. It's not fair, not fair. I never meant any harm. Could you take some of this weight off my chest? I don't want all those clothes. Let me alone, let me alone. It's not fair, it's not fair. What enormous blue bottles. They say you get used to them, and then it would end in a canine howl. Ransom never could make up his mind whether it was a trick or whether a decaying psychic energy that had once been Weston were indeed fitfully and miserably alive within the body that sat there beside him. He discovered that any hatred he had once felt for the professor was dead. He found it natural to pray fervently for his soul. Yet what he felt for Weston was not exactly pity. Up till that moment, whenever he had thought of hell, he had pictured the lost souls as being still human. Now, as the frightful abyss which parts ghosthood from manhood yawned before him, pity was almost swallowed up in horror, in the unconquerable revulsion of the life within him from positive and self-consuming death. If the remains of Weston were at such moments speaking through the lips of the unman, then Weston was not now a man at all. The forces which had begun, perhaps years ago, to eat away his humanity had now completed their work. The intoxicated will, which had been slowly poisoning the intelligence and the affections, had now at last poisoned itself, and the whole psychic organism had fallen to pieces. Only a ghost was left, an everlasting unrest, a crumbling, a ruin, an odor of decay. And this, thought Ransom, might be my destination or hers, but of course the hours spent alone with the unmanned were like hours in a back area. The real business of life was the interminable conversation between the tempter and the green lady. Taken hour by hour, the progress was hard to estimate, but as the days passed, Ransom could not resist the conviction that the general development was in the enemy's favor. There were of course ups and downs. Often the unman was unexpectedly repulsed by some simplicity which it seemed not to have anticipated. Often, too, Ransom's own contributions to the terrible debate were for the moment successful. There were 3 times when he thought, "Thank God, we've won at last."